This week we report on Russia's pink and chum salmon harvest and compare it to Alaska 2020 salmon season as it winds down, to then provide a sense of market conditions for global wild salmon production. With under 2 months left in Russia's Pacific salmon fishery, just over 272,000 metric tons have been harvested, which is about 50% less than in 2018 and 40% less than in 2019. Narrowing down on pinks, and only 174,000 metric tons have been harvested, down about 65% from 2018's harvest of 511,000 metric tons. Preseason forecast for 2020 pinks in Russia called for about 222,000 metric tons, down about 30% from 2018's preseason forecast of 338,000 metric tons. Moving on to Russian chums, and only 56,000 metric tons have been harvested, which is down about 50% from 2019's harvest of 112,000 metric tons. Preseason forecasts for 2020 chums in Russia called for about 113,000 metric tons, down about 2% from 2019's preseason forecast of 116,000 metric tons. In speaking with our VP of Asian Operations, and the situation in China is that Russian salmon has been short and boats have been continually raising their prices. Raw material pricing on chums have made a bull run from $3,800 per metric ton, or $1.70 per pound US, about a month ago to $4,600 per metric ton right now, which translates to about $2 per pound US. Pink salmon raw materials are caught up in a similar situation in China, going from $2,600 to $3,400 per metric ton, or about $1.20 per pound and $1.55 per pound US respectively. Going back a few weeks, it was reported that Russian boats did not want to make commitments at the higher prices as they wanted pricing at even higher levels. About 300 tons of pinks should have arrived into Dalian late last week, where one plant owner has informed they want plants to bid on the product, raising concerns that you may not even secure fish at the $3,400 price point. For now, we don't believe the market is ready for these prices, which has even forced some plants to turn to Alaskan suppliers. However, inventories of Alaskan chums are essentially drained. Our recommendation to buyers is to secure whatever inventories you can, as there is no end in sight to where prices will climb up to this season. Now moving on to Alaska as the 2020 salmon season comes to a close. Over 113 million wild Pacific salmon have been harvested, which translates to about 85% of the preseason forecast of 132 million fish. Although many runs struggled this year, it's not all bad news, as Bristol Bay once again produced a robust harvest of over, or nearly, 200 million pounds of sockeye for the 5th year in a row. Now let's go to Andy Wink, Executive Director of the Bristol Bay Regional Seafood Development Association, to give us commentary on how this season played out and to also provide some insight into what things might look like in the future.
Outside of Bristol Bay, things weren't very good for the Alaska salmon runs this year. Alaska's chum salmon harvests were down by 61%. Coho was down 49%. And harvests in non-Bristol Bay sockeye fisheries in Alaska were down 50%. So we did see good harvests in a few pink salmon fisheries in the state. But, like I said, overall, not a great year. But, luckily, sockeye harvests were, again, abundant in Bristol Bay. Fishermen caught nearly 200 million pounds. And even though that's bigger than average, it's still down 9% from last year. And so with lower sockeye harvests coming out of Russia and closures in Canada, we estimate that the global sockeye harvest was down about 26% in 2020, and that's a loss of roughly 100 million pounds in round weight. So Bristol Bay's salmon industry and its local medical facilities really did an amazing job of controlling the COVID-19 virus. There was a lot that went into that. There was, I think, over 10,000 tests done in Bristol Bay. There was a lot of concern going into the season about, whether we'd have any hospitalizations, whether anyone would get seriously sick or maybe even die. And we didn't have any of that. There was no community spread, no hospitalizations. And so it was a really successful season in terms of keeping COVID at bay and catching a lot of fish, both of which happened. So, with strong demand for healthy wild salmon and this drastic decline in supply, we would expect that wholesale pricing will remain high, if not maybe go higher as limited supplies are drawn down ahead of next season. For the fleet, if that happens, I think there's an expectation that they would maybe see some price adjustments from processors later this year, or at the very least engage the fishermen to explain why the ex-vessel price had to be so much lower in 2020. But despite the disappointing price to fishermen this year, I'd say the future for Bristol Bay looks great. All the river systems met their escapement goals. We had a huge run. We've now had 5 years in a row of large harvests, and consumer demand is very strong. And so that last part is something that our organization, which is a trade association for Bristol Bay fishermen, we provide a service to the supply chain in offering a regional brand for Bristol Bay sockeye, and that provides marketing assets and promotional assistance to anyone selling Bristol Bay sockeye, mostly free of charge. Our goal with this brand is to help retailers, distributors, direct marketers, and really anyone else selling Bristol Bay sockeye to tell the story of this amazing fishery. We've got incredible pictures, a modern brand design, looks really sharp, ready-to-use social media content, a recipe library, sales assets, retail training resources, and much more. So if anyone's interested in that, they can visit marketing.bristolbaysockeye.org and get more info.
With Russia's contribution of an estimated 132 million fish from 272,000 metric tons, we can conclude that global markets will see at least 542,000 metric tons of new season salmon from two of the world's largest wild Pacific salmon producers, Alaska and Russia. Japan is the third largest producer of wild Pacific salmon, contributing 59,000 and 95,000 metric tons from 18 million and 35 million fish in 2019 and 2018, respectively. However, a large portion of their harvest is used to service their domestic markets. In British Columbia, Canada, the 2020 salmon season is expected to be worse than 2019, where less than 3,000 metric tons were commercially harvested from about 900,000 fish. Compare this to a bumper year such as 2014, where over 37,000 metric tons of wild Pacific salmon were harvested from 14.8 million fish. As for salmon from Washington State, the Puget Sound fishery is set to start in October with preseason run size forecast of 762,000 chums and 469,000 cohos. Fishery managers of the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife are warning of another tough year. Commercial harvest of chum salmon in the state of Washington totaled 287,000 fish in 2019, compared to 849,000 in 2018 and 1.4 million in 2017. If you're not already, be sure to subscribe to our 3-Minute Market Insight by signing up in the form below to keep tuned to all future market insights. Thank you for joining me for the Tradex Foods 3-Minute Market Insight. This has been Kyla Ganton reminding you to stay safe, buy smart, and eat more seafood.